am Amy Layton.
And I'm Luca Miller.
And this is Tea Time in Olympia. Join us this month as we talk to Jessica Lynn. Jessica is a nationally known speaker and activist, and also the founder of Your True Gender.
And I'll be talking with Kim Reid, a local attorney who specializes in family law here in Thurston County.
So let's jump right in. Recently, I had the pleasure of interviewing Jessica Lynn. Jessica is the founder of Your True Gender, a nonprofit organization in California. As a nationally known speaker, Jessica lectures at colleges and universities around the country, telling her personal story, hoping that it will educate others and foster a more accepting society. Her lecture tour brought her here to Washington State, and she found the time to come to Olympia and meet with us. So here's her story. Joining me today is Jessica Lynn, a professional speaker and outspoken advocate of transgender rights. Ms. Lynn is president and co-founder of the nonprofit group Your True Gender, and has spoken all across America about her truth, and has taken time out of her busy schedule to come to Olympia and join us today. Thank you for being here, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a 51-year-old woman. I knew at a very, very young age that a lot of us in the trans population knew. I knew at 3-4 years old, but I was born in a different time period. I'm born in 1965. And when I was a young child, I thought I was the only human being on the planet that felt like this. So I went through life living a facade, went through and had the same struggles as a lot of people did, but plus a little bit more. Being in this body that I didn't feel comfortable with at a very, very young age. I did, as you hear a lot of people did, took a razor blade to my penis when I was about 7 years old, very common. And I lived the fake life. And I finally, when I was 17 years old, I came out to a girlfriend, and I fully came out to her, and she fully accepted me, and I thought it was going to be fixing me and cure me forever. And I proposed to her, and we started planning our lives together. But then in 1985, a drunk driver hit us and killed her. And so my life went into the total toilet for about a year and a half. And I drank, and I used a lot of drugs, and I just attempted suicide numerous times. And I finally came to when I had a meeting with my parents, and it came to that my parents had always known about me wanting to be a girl at a very, very young age, and they had planned on transitioning me when I was 5 years old. And so this was a very bittersweet moment for me, but I finally came to truth with myself, and I went back and forth about transitioning back and forth, and I started planning on my transition in the late 80s. And during my planning period, I met a young girl, and she was my friend, and I pretty much came out to her, and she accepted me. And but I slept with her a few times, and I ended up getting her pregnant. So we got married. I put my transition behind me, and we had 2 small children. And we ended up, I just couldn't be with the woman anymore. We ended up finally divorcing in about 1996, what I remember. And long story short, we ended up getting back together briefly and having a 3rd child, and could not get along again. And then it went through a huge legal battle in the state of California, where it was brought forth that I am a transgender and that I want to be with a man, and the judge did not care. And in California, after a 3-year legal battle that cost me about $65,000, the judge gave me full legal physical custody of all of my 3 children. And this went on, and so I was a single father raising 3 boys, doing a damn good job. Long story short, my ex-wife was in a bad car accident. During her recovery period, I let her come back into our house, and we started discussing me transitioning, and she said, I will help you come back and, transition into the woman. I will be your friend. So I let her back in the household. I put her through schooling, and we made upon a deal, and like I said, we raised the children as a family. And after a couple of years, she graduated. My eldest son graduated high school, and I let her take the 3 children to the state of Texas, while I stay behind and do my transition. In Christmas of 2009, I flew to Texas and came out to my eldest son, which in turn fully 100% accepted me and came back to California and helped me do my transition. I came out to my middle son before my transition, and he fully accepted me, came out to California, had no problem. I had my surgery, I transitioned, I had my surgery in September of 2010. And then when the deal was that my youngest would know, I came out to my wife and I said, it's ex-wife, and I said, it's time we tell our youngest, Curtis. She in turn filed a lawsuit, which she took me to the state of Texas. They made me jump through some incredible hoops. I surpassed all of those hoops, but the judge would not allow any of the evidence in, and ended up removing all of my parental rights to my youngest child, who was 12 years old at the time. And for the first time in U.S. history, removed a name off a child's birth certificate, a parent's name off a child's birth certificate due to gender transition. And so because of this, I've become a huge advocate. And I travel the country, and I started doing it in California, and it started to grow. And this semester alone, since January, what are we at right now, May? Since January, I've spoken to about 44 different universities from coast to coast, anywhere from Florida to Alabama to Mississippi to, just 2 days ago, I was in Washington State here at Eastern Washington University, and I spoke at Central Washington University. And I go and I help people understand. Some of the schools I do 8, 9 lectures in during my 2 or 3 day period. And I travel, and the way I look at it is, these young students are our future teachers, our future doctors, our future parents, and our future congressmen, and our future senators, and maybe our future presidents. And if they can be accepting of people such as ourselves, we're helping change the future world. So there will be no more judges saying you can't see your child. There will be no more people saying you can't use this restroom. We need people to accept us for who we are. That's my goal. And so it's been taken over really, really well. And so we started Your True Gender to help fund this. And we started, it's a 501c3 based out of California. Me and my friend Peggy Jones put together this 501c3. And we worked together with Dr. Marcy Bowers, Dr. Joel Beck, and quite a few other surgeons and people in the community, and we're trying to spread awareness as far as we can reach. Next year I am going out of the country. I've been invited to Australia, to Canada, to New Zealand, and so, but we have a lot of work to do here in the States first, and that's I want to concentrate my effort on, so that's basically what we're doing. And we also, with our other resources, we held a conference in California in San Luis Obispo last October 9th, 10th, and 11th. Your True Gender did, and it was one of the best conferences in the country. Last year we had some of the best professionals, and it was rated as one of the best, and it was our first one. It was incredible. So that's what, a long story short, that's
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that much. I mean, that was a pretty good summarization.
Yeah. I could go on for 2 hours, but I won't.
Let's see. You touched a little bit about it, but when did you first realize that you did not identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth?
I'm right about 4 years old, 3 to 4 years old. I did not feel comfortable in my own skin. My mom recently did an interview, and she found me with a pair of scissors in my bathtub trying to cut off my penis at 3 years old, okay? I hated, but in 1969, 70, the most you saw Bobby Brady on TV. If you saw him in a dress, everybody's pointing at him, laughing at him, and why would I want to be pointed at, laughed at? It was tearing me apart. I had no idea. I thought I was the only human being that felt this way on the planet, And it wasn't just I wanted to wear shoes or I wanted to wear this. I just didn't want my hair. I didn't want to just look like a girl. I wanted to be a mother. I watched my sister walk down the aisle, marry her boyfriend, and at 7 years old, 8 years old, I was fantasizing about being her. And that tore a child apart at that age. Did not know how to comprehend it. So I knew at a very, very young age, which you find quite common. Not everybody. We are all unique. I have friends that didn't know until 18 years old. I've had friends that don't know until 40 years old. But more common, kids know it, people know it at a young age,
You've told me this a little bit off camera, but could you talk a little bit about it if it's not too difficult? I mean, could you tell us a little bit about the custody battle and the struggle and just the lengths that were gone to ensure that you couldn't have custody of your child?
So during the court thing in Texas, as I said, in California, when I came out to my eldest son. He came back to California and lived with me. My middle son came back to California and met Jessica, and it was a non-issue, okay? He met Jessica, and it was like, Dad, you look a little bit different. He was understanding. Then I transitioned, I did my thing. I was on the phone with my youngest son all the time, and it was saying, Dad, when are we gonna see you? And then I said, okay, Rachel, it's time we tell Curtis. I emailed her, texted her, sent her letters, I sent her registered letters, nothing. Then one day I get a letter from the state of Texas saying Rachel is trying to remove my parental rights. And so I went and started looking for attorneys, and every attorney said $100,000. I finally found an attorney named John McCall, and he says, I know her attorney, and I can get you, to get this. So I fly to Texas, and we go in front of the judge, and the judge said 2 orders that day. He says, you're allowed to talk to your child anytime you want via the telephone only, but if you tell your child that you have transitioned, I am going to personally throw you in jail, okay? I will come to California and throw you in jail. He says, another order, he says, you must have Dr. Ben Albritton, located in Dallas, Texas, to do a full-blown psychiatric evaluation on you on or before January 31st, 2013. This is a court order. If I do not have this evaluation, I go to jail, okay? I came out of the courtroom, started calling the evaluator's office, and his secretary calls me back a few hours later and says, the soonest we can do it is Monday after Thanksgiving of that year, and I think it was November 24th or 26th. Okay, I can't remember. And so I made my arrangements, came back to California, and it's $3,000. Came back to California, wired them $3,000, plane ticket, car rental, hotel, and I flew back to Texas a couple days after Thanksgiving. As I turn up to Texas, I stop by my attorney's office. My attorney says he talked to an attorney from the ACLU in New York, and they sent him a letter saying, do not use this evaluator. He's a right-wing theology professor that's known in the state of Texas to vote against the LGBT population. He's a student of Biola University. Google Biola University, you can do it right now. And on their homepage, it says you condemn transsexuality. It is against God's law. This is as of right now, you can Google it, and it says on their homepage is transsexuality is abomination, okay, of God, right? And this is who the judge ordered was going to tell me if I ever see my child again. I go into the evaluator's office, I walk in, and there's pictures of Jesuses and crosses all over the walls, and there's Bibles all over the desk, okay? Start my evaluation. How many men I've been with? What's my relationship? This and that. 2 days of intense questioning, MMPI, all these things. He goes, I need names of 10 to 15 people. Give him 15 names. Half of them were couples. And he starts his investigation, okay? The end of it, it said it has to be done by January 31st, 2013. It's now January 29th. I want to see my child. I'm still not able to talk to my child. I had to file a contempt of court case. I want to talk to my child, and I want to see my child. I'm start calling my attorney, going, leave it alone, Jessica, leave it alone. And I remember saying F you to him on the phone, and I started calling the evaluator's office at on January 30th. His secretary goes, let me get back to you. At the very end of the day on January 30th, she calls me, she goes, Jessica, your evaluation is done, but it took a little bit longer than we thought. It's an extra $1,500, okay? Call my attorney, goes, you have no choice. Wire them the money. So on January 31st, I wired them $1,500. And the very end of the day, January 31st, the evaluation comes back in. It came about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock that night. It's a 22-page document, and it says that Jessica is the better parent, that I should start seeing my child immediately. In fact, during the case, the evaluator even emailed the judge and said, what Rachel is doing to this child is dangerous, and it's against the law in Texas. This is what their own evaluator said. The judge, her attorney says, and my attorney says, I'm going to make a phone call tomorrow and see when you can start seeing your child. It took 2.5 weeks for them to get together for a 5-minute phone conversation. My attorney calls me, gets off the phone, he goes, it's going to take you several $100,000 to ever talk to your child again. He wanted to write $10,000, $20,000 right then and there. I had no more money. I was broke. Went back and forth. Ended up firing. He wanted off the case, and I started looking for other attorneys, and they all said the same thing. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Finally, an attorney for the ACLU said, go file for your own thing. So in June of 2013, me and my eldest son went in front of the judge and said, we want to see my child. Here is your evaluation. They would not, even though it was a court order, if I don't do it, I go to jail. The judge would not allow one word of that evaluation in the court document. Nothing. In the stand, she gets under oath and says, I never knew that Jeff wanted to be a girl, right? We pull out an LA Superior Court document with a wax ring on it, never been opened, hand it to the bailiff. The judge opens it, reads it, and he goes, not admissible. Even though it sits there and says, I knew Jeff wanted to be a girl. My eldest son, 21 years old, gets on the stand. Both me and her attorney said, Jeffrey, when did you and your mom talk about your dad transition? He said, when my dad came to Christmas in June of 2009, and he left back to California, my mom came to me and said, did your dad tell you he's going to transition to a woman? And they talked about it. And he said, yes. And her said was, what do you think about it? And he goes, I'm going to go back to California, help my dad. She gets on the stand under oath and says, my son is lying and should go to jail for lying against her own child.
Her own child? She wanted to throw
Go
her
in
own
jail
child in
to
jail
prove-
just to get back at you?
To prove her innocence that she did not know. And the judge knew this, right? So at the end of the day of the judgment, the judge goes, go home and I will email you my results. And he actually yelled at me and said, me and Jeffrey came here one way. I've never laid a finger on my child. I've done nothing wrong. There's your goddamn evaluation. I've done nothing. She's known about this. The judge yelled at me and says, go home and I'll email you my results. So that was a Monday. Came home Friday morning, turned on the computer, and there it is, saying, Jessica Lynn, your parental rights have been terminated. They say I abandoned my child. My choice of lifestyle, then I abandoned my child, right? So the next day, right, my little brother, what was the heartbroken is, right? The next day, that day, my little brother is an attorney for the ACLU in California. Mm-hmm. And he worked in different things. He worked for Johnny Cochran's law firm, and he was on the phone with him all day because I was crying and crying and crying. Here's my little child. He never allowed to see again. He was 12 years old at the time. My little brother goes, now the ACLU will get involved. Now Transgender Law Center, now Lambda Legal will jump in. And he worked for ACLU. On Monday, I'll help you file a thing. That was on a Friday. The next day was a Saturday. I had a boyfriend at the time, and I lived in a place called Grover Beach. He worked in San Luis Obispo, and he lived in Atascadero. And my routine was I would go home with him on Saturday and spend the night, whatever, all day Sunday, whatever. Saturday, we met in San Luis Obispo at his work. We went to a friend of mine's party, and I'm following him home. About 7 o'clock at night, I'm about a quarter mile from his house. You know what I mean? He's in front of me. My phone rings. It's my sister saying, Jessica, where are you? I said, I'm at my boyfriend's wife. And she goes, our little brother just committed suicide. Okay, this was the day after. So I left my boyfriend, I come to my mom's house, and she was just sitting there. He didn't die of a suicide, he died of a drug overdose, but that night I was told of a suicide. So we spent the next few weeks burying my little brother. He had 3 small children, dealing with my mom. That was her youngest child, is now dead, right? Her older, my dad had already died, and one of my brothers had dropped dead of a heart attack. So now her youngest child was dead. So we dealt with that for a few weeks and dealt with my mom. So then a few weeks later, I pulled out my computer and I said, time to file an appeal, right? Now the ACLU. I turn on my computer, I'm typing it in. It says, in the state of Texas, you have 30 to 90 days to file an appeal. Open it up, dig down a little bit, except when you lose parental rights. You have 21 days. Okay, there's one little loophole in the law. Never saw it. It was at day 23. Oh, not a damn thing I could do.
That must have been so devastating.
I started calling the doctor, started calling everybody at the ACLU. There's nothing you can do, Jessica. So you can imagine how absolute devastating that was, right? Mm-hmm. Just devastated 2013. Cried and cried and cried. It was just horrible, right? The end of 2013 rolls around. It's Christmas Eve. My son and his girlfriend go to San Diego. I'm alone on Christmas Eve. I come in, I had a little clothing boutique, I'm alone. Open up the mailbox, December 24th. I open up the mailbox, and there's a yellow envelope, and I show it on my screens when I display it in my classrooms. From her attorney, to me, Jessica Lynn, dated December 21st, 2013. There's this postmark on it. I opened it up as a stack of papers. December 20th, 2000. They wrote it on Friday, December 20th, right? Open it up. Please find an enclosed copy of the order of termination. So they sent it again, so I would receive it on Christmas Eve just to say, you're never allowed to see your child again, right?
They sent you a note on Christmas Eve doing that?
On Christmas Eve, okay. Then they went a little bit farther. On Christmas Eve, on that same letter, it says, Jeffrey Butterworth's name, my name, shall be removed from the birth certificate of this child. And it was dated and stamped in September 20th of 2013, but they waited till Christmas Eve to send the letter, just to say, F you, a little bit harder, just to say you're never, so first time in US history that has ever happened to a transgender person to have their name removed. You hear parents losing parental rights, or not parental rights so much, but guardian, they get to see their child under care or whatever, but never, never, never has anybody, that's how far this Texas judge went. He's an elected official. So that's why, that's what started me saying, we're going to change the world so that his child doesn't have an issue. Anybody in the world, I go to college classes all the time, these are our future teachers, future doctors, our future leaders, and our future politicians. You know, Ted Cruz goes to these colleges. I go to Princeton. I go to University of Pennsylvania. I'm going to Harvard. These are the students that are going to learn, you know?
Mm-hmm. So, Jessica, what has been the happiest part of your journey? Like, what has been the best part, happiest moment so far in your journey?
Being true to myself, feeling comfortable in my skin, and helping people learn about us, okay? That every day is better than the last day, if that makes sense to you. Last night I helped a young lady helping with a young child. To me, that's a difference. I'll travel all the way to Indianapolis and I'll speak to one person, and that's worth my whole summer of traveling, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. One person, and I know I'm helping more than one person. So every day is a new experience, is helping people understand or becoming true to themselves or whatever. So there's less and less discrimination, and more kids feeling comfortable that they're not alone in this world. So there's not one specific thing, there's numerous things, and being able to look in the mirror and say, I like what I see, you know.
That's a big one. That is a big one. You got to learn to love yourself.
Yeah. I need to lose a little weight, and I want to have a little bit of hair, and I can't wait till my hair gets a little longer, but that's just, you know, cosmetic stuff. Mm-hmm. People say, do you feel, one of the common questions is, do you feel it's enough? You know, do you feel like your surgeries are done? Yeah, I do. But we always want to look better. We want to get our hair done differently. We want our nails to look perfect. And that's just female things looking prettier. You know, that's just common, everyday things. So I'm very, very content of where I've come. So.
Well, we've talked about the happiest part of your journey, and let's move on to what has been the most difficult part of your journey.
My 2 children. Okay, and that, of course, is when the judge said, you're never allowed to see your child again. That, to me, is just mind-boggling. And just being away from my child, especially my youngest, okay, is the most hurtful thing you can ever imagine. My own little child, my own boy, that I used to kiss and hold his hand and walk him down the street and take him to school. Never allowed to talk to him again, you know? This is my only child. Not my only child, but my little boy, my child. And I'm not even allowed to be a father. I don't care that I look a little different. He would have accepted it within days, you know? And yet a judge said, because I am what I am, I'm not even good enough to be a parent. So that has been the most absolute difficult thing that I've gone through.
And it's just wrong to do that to a parent.
To a human being.
To a human being in general. That is just so wrong.
They treat animals better.
You're unfit to be around a child, yet gives the same kind of rights to a sex offender.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
If you have a message for the trans community, what would that message be today?
My biggest thing is, I get questioned that a lot, is towards a young person saying, do I or do I not? My biggest thing is, if you know what you're going to do, 3 words, go for it. Never, never, never live the life for somebody else. Okay, you get people saying, I had it 2 days ago in Washington, the other side of Washington, saying, this young boy that wants to transition to a woman, the father doesn't accept it. Does this young kid live with his father? No. Does that father have to look at that child every single day? No, he's 23, 24 years old. You know, your dad's going to go, this is your life. Who am I? Who's your father? Who's your mother to say that you have to follow exactly by this rule and this rule? You have to live your life. You have to be comfortable looking in that mirror and saying, this is me. I have to feel good looking in that mirror. I have to be comfortable being me. Live your life truthfully. It would solve a lot of problems in this world. Stop suicide, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all these medications that they misdiagnosing, saying, okay, you're bipolar, you're this or that. Why don't you just be true to yourself? You know what I'm saying? Don't hurt anybody. And why can't the world accept us for who we are? You know?
What message would you like to share with the cisgender or non-transgender people who may be watching today?
I want them to learn of acceptance, right? There may be 1,000 people watching today. Out of that 1,000, 10 of them, 20 of them may have children in the future, and one of them is going to come, or, you know, all of them are going to have children, whatever. 20 of those kids are going to come and say, Mom, Dad, I want to be a boy, or I want to be a girl, or I may be gay, or I may be this, or I may be bisexual, or I may want to be somewhere in the middle. I may want to be both genders. And those parents are going to have to say, that's my child. I don't care. When we're in their womb, how many parents say, I don't care if it's a boy or a girl, as long as he's healthy, right? But when they come out and they say, well, if he's trans, he's out of the house. You know how many kids are kicked out of the house, or turned to the streets, turn to drugs, commit suicide because mom or dad doesn't accept them, or their religion doesn't accept them. And what I want is to teach the world about acceptance, that we are all unique individuals. It'd be a very, very boring place if we were all fit into that same box. And that is my goal, in my way of doing, is reaching as many people as humanly possible to help them. And that's why when I go to a college or a university or whatever, I've done high schools, I want those people to be able to ask me anything that they physically want. If they want to email, they want to question me, I'll go sit and have a cup of coffee with them for 3 hours. I don't care. I want those people to understand that this is who we are.
Looking back, would you have done anything differently?
I would have come out, I mean, there's a catch-22 here. I would have come out when I was a young child. My life would have been beautiful, easy, comfortable, no suicide, but I wouldn't have met Barbara, or I may have met her, and may have been friends with her, and been a best friend with her as I became best friends with her, but I wouldn't have had my children, okay? It's a catch-22 because my kids are my life. Now, if it comes back to where I had my kids, when I would have transitioned, I would have kept my kids with me. My youngest one would have accepted me. When I went and picked him up in 3rd grade once, his teacher comes to me and goes, Mr. Butterworth, did you know your child? She goes, I want to talk to you. And I said, why, what's up? And she goes, there's a young child in this classroom that goes to the bathroom. He wears diapers to school. None of the other boys will play with him because he has uncontrollable bowel syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. Except for your son. Your son is one of the most popular students in this class, and your son is the only one to play with him. On the way home, I said, what's up, Curtis? What, you know? And he goes, he's my friend. He's my friend Michael. He's my friend. Nobody else. Who cares? But that's my son that was turned against. Well, I don't know if anybody's turned against me. That's who the judge said, because I am who I am, I'm never allowed to talk to. He would have been the most accepting of me out of my 3 children. And yet society has said, I'm not, I'm wrong. So when I would have done my transition, I would have kept them all with me and just pushed her out.
If you would like more information on Jessica Lynn, you can check out her YouTube, or you can also check her out you can check out her website and learn more about her wonderful organization. We will be talking about that shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I totally appreciate it, and thank you for what you are doing. I think it's wonderful, and I love your state of Washington here, and I've already been invited back, so it looks like I'll be back here in September, October at both the university, well actually 3 or 4 universities, so we're already scheduling, so thank you, and bless you. Thank you.
Welcome back. Today I'm talking with Kim Reid, attorney at law, about issues faced by transgender parents when seeking custody or visitation rights to their children, and the legal rights of transgender youth. Let's hear what Kim has to tell us. Hi, I'm Lucas Miller. Welcome to Tea Time. Today I have with me Kimberly Reid of the Law Offices of Kimberly Reid. And Kimberly is going to talk to us today about some of the legal issues that face trans people in their search for custody of their children and their divorce proceedings. So Kimberly, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your law practice and what you specialize in?
Sure. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I went to undergrad at Syracuse University in Syracuse, New York, and got my law degree from Vermont Law School, and graduated in 2005 and moved out to the state of Washington. I fell in love with the area when I was out here for a fellowship in 2004. And I was working for the Redford Law Firm for about 4 years, and then I opened up my own firm, the Law Offices of Kimberly S. Reid, and I focus on family law. And so I do all aspects of family law. I handle dissolutions, child custody, child support. I do domestic violence protection order hearings and sexual assault protection order hearings. Actually, I'm appointed counsel for Thurston County. So if a petitioner files for a protection order, a sexual assault protection order, and the respondent shows up with an attorney, then they appoint me to represent the petitioner. And I also represent children in dependency actions. So if CPS removes a child from their parents' care, then the child gets appointed counsel in certain circumstances. And so I represent children in those actions.
So I'm wondering, Kimberly, can you tell us how much success do trans people usually have in the state of Washington or here in Thurston County in particular when seeking custody of their children or visitation rights or good outcomes when they go through a divorce proceeding?
Well, I think it's kind of hard to put a number on the success rate. I think that every county varies. Family law is very state specific, and each county is different. And quite frankly, I think each judicial officer is different, whether you're at a commissioner level or a judge level. I think we're very fortunate in Thurston County. We have a great judiciary, and in my experience with cases that I've handled that are LGBT members that are going through this process, the court has been very, I think, careful not to distinguish difference. The main concern for the court is always what is in the best interest of the children. And so they have to look at that first and foremost. And now there's been case law that has come down that said the court can't distinguish between parents and who the better parent is based on their status as an LGBT member. And so I think that the court here does a great job of saying, who is this child more bonded to? I mean, there's a whole set of factors that we look at under the statute to make that determination, but they want to look at what's in the best interest of the children. And having an attachment with the parents, whether they're a member of the LGBT community or not, is always going to be a main concern for the court. So I think as long as the are the better parents, maintaining the better parents, and it's in the best interest of the children, then I think the success rate, I think in Thurston County anyway, to get custody or placement of your children is fairly high.
Okay. So do you think it's maybe different in some other counties, other parts of the state that?
I would think so. I think I've experienced that in other counties, depending on who I'm representing. Honestly,
Right.
Unfortunately, I think that gender plays into that, and so I think some judges or commissioners may have preconceived notions of who may be a better parent based on their gender, and so I could see that being an issue.
Yeah, because I mean,
counties.
we know, of course, that different states, depending on how conservative they are,
Certainly.
Certainly we've heard horror stories of, trans people having, terrible outcomes with their visitation and custody rights. In a state like Washington that's maybe not so conservative overall, but certainly has more conservative areas.
Certainly.
I would think there'd be some variability.
Well, there is one case that that did occur in Eastern Washington, and a father transitioned from male to female and ended up not getting custody at trial, and appealed. Sent that case to the appellate court and ended up not getting custody. And the father of the children, the biological father, was saying that he felt like he was discriminated against based on the fact that he was going to transition. He hadn't transitioned yet at the time of trial. And the court had made a determination that they thought the process that he was going to go through may cause an issue between him and his children, but they didn't have that, right, exactly, but they didn't know that because there was no evidence that was provided at trial that would show that that was a situation, but everything else showed that these children were very well bonded to the father.
Right.
So there, there's an appellate case that had gone through, and it didn't actually make it to the Supreme Court, but the appellate court upheld the trial court decision, unfortunately, but was very clear that the court cannot make determinations regarding the best interests of children based on someone's gender identity or being a member of the LGBT community, which sounds ironic because they ruled against him anyway and just used different factors. So I guess, that's kind of what the court can do is, you can kind of mold a decision to what you want what the outcome to be.
So now that marriage equality is the law of the land, do you see that having a significant effect going forward on the outcomes for custody proceedings, divorce proceedings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so before we had equality in marriage, a lot of times what we would have to do is file a meretricious claim, which is a derogatory term, but it was utilized to split up property or anything that was obtained, since Washington is a community property state. Under a meretricious claim, you could basically divide your property, but you weren't allowed to award maintenance. So if you had a spouse that didn't make money and the other spouse did, the court couldn't award spousal maintenance to the one spouse that may have needed it. And then we had domestic partnerships, which was great and kind of put us on footing, on the same footing. However, I myself had this circumstance where I was in a domestic partnership in the state of Washington, but I was married in Vermont and could not get divorced in Washington because we did not have marriage equality at that point. And so I could dissolve my domestic partnership, but I couldn't dissolve my marriage. Fortunately, the laws changed, and so I was able to dissolve that marriage here in the state of Washington, as I'm a resident of the state of Washington. And I think that now, because we have marriage equality across the board, the court just looks at it like that. And it makes it very, very easy for us to just say, we're just filing a dissolution of marriage or a legal separation or whatever that may be. And there is no distinction. Is this a domestic partnership? Is it a marriage? It's just marriage. And I think that the court takes into consideration the same thing in regard to custody of the children, what's in the best interest of the children.
Well, that should always be the primary question, I think.
Absolutely, well, it is.
So for parents seeking custody or seeking visitation rights, what can a trans person do to strengthen their case, improve the outcome? What can they do to make themselves look good to the courts?
Well, I think what I would tell any parent that is going through that process, just maintain that loving relationship with your child. Never, ever put the weight of that on your child. Don't ask them to make determinations that aren't appropriate for a child. And just maintain that loving bond that you have with your child. There are circumstances you can ask the court to appoint a guardian ad litem, and they do an independent evaluation for the court, and basically can tell the court to report to the court what they believe is in the best interest of the children. But I think the most important thing always is just parenting and loving your children. I think that will give you a leg up in family court, just because you're focusing on your children's needs and not your own.
I certainly find that to be true as a GLBTQ youth volunteer. I think that's, that nothing really replaces that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we know that a lot of transgender people, because of discrimination, live below the poverty line, have difficulty finding employment. Are there resources for low-income trans people who can't necessarily afford legal representation?
Here in Thurston County, we do have the Thurston County Volunteer Legal Services, or TCVLS, and they hold clinics several times a month, actually. There is a family law clinic that's done a couple times a month. There is the Safe Place Clinic, which is the domestic violence clinic that's handled a couple times a month. And there's also a clinic for housing. It's a housing justice project, and they help with evictions and landlord-tenant issues. And if you need assistance, then you can call what we call the Clear Line.
Okay.
And that's a toll-free number, and that's 888-201-1014. They will screen the person calling to see if they meet the financial qualifications. And if so, they will call TCBLS, who will schedule a time for the person to come into one of these clinics. And you get a half hour free, or actually the Housing Justice Project sometimes will actually have an attorney appointed to help you in an eviction process, so you'll have someone in court with you. But in other circumstances, you can at least meet with an attorney and get free legal advice that can help you in your case. There are also other attorneys in town that may do what we call as low bono, maybe not free work, but reduced rate work. And just call around, because there are a lot of attorneys in town that are willing to do that and to help people out that need help.
Okay. So can you say a little bit about the rights of the children in these processes, especially perhaps children who are themselves trans-identified or gender non-conforming? I mean, we know, for example, that, some 40% of homeless youth identify as GLBTQ. What kind of legal resources are there for young people?
Such a broad question. There are so many different realms of family law. So if you're talking about a child in a let's say a dissolution matter, then the child doesn't really have a lot of voice, I think, with the court. The voice is really more so through the guardian ad litem. So I think it's very important that in those circumstances that you would ask the court to appoint, as a parent of a child, ask the court to appoint a guardian ad litem to have these discussions with the child. If there's information that needs to get before the court that the parent feels like they can't convey, or they need to convey in a neutral way. If there is a youth that needs services, we have what's called a CHINS petition. It's a child in need of services. And we could go into them. There's a lot of detail regarding what those are. But I also do dependency work, so I represent youth in actions where CPS removes them from a home. And so the youth that are in dependency actions have a little bit more of a voice and say in what's going on with their case. And so they have access to a lot more resources than I would say a child who's involved in maybe whose parents are involved in a dissolution action.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kimberly, for talking to us about these issues. These are very important things to know. The producers of Tea Time have asked me to bring up an issue they feel is important. In 2016, states across America began to introduce harmful legislation and initiatives that seek to repeal non-discrimination protections and restrict transgender people's access to gender-specific facilities like restrooms. The sponsors of these measures claim that these proposals are necessary to prevent sexual violence and to protect women and children. All of the evidence shows these claims are false. Over 200 municipalities and 18 states have non-discrimination laws, many of which have been in place for decades, protecting the rights of transgender people. None of these jurisdictions have seen a rise in sexual violence or other public safety issues because of these laws. Assaulting another person in a restroom or changing room remains against the law in every single state. These laws do not allow men to go into women's restrooms, period. These claims are based either on a flawed understanding of what it means to be transgender or a misrepresentation of the law. Discriminating against transgender people does not give anyone more control over their body or security. Those who continue to spread falsehoods about transgender people and the non-discrimination laws that protect us are putting transgender people in harm's way and making no one safer. We refuse to stand by while the needs of survivors, both transgender and non-transgender, are ignored in order to push a political agenda that does nothing to serve and protect victims or potential victims. We at Tea Time feel these initiatives are not really about where people pee. They have a more sinister goal of repealing civil rights. Attempting to strip the Human Rights Commission of their authority to make rules and provide assistance to transgender people is a much larger issue and affects our right to fair housing, equality in the workplace, and access to health care. It sets a bad precedent and allows for future challenges to the Human Rights Commission's authority to protect the civil rights of all Washingtonians, including women, children, people of color, and the disabled. Furthermore, a recent analysis determined that I-1515, if passed, will cost the state of Washington $4.5 billion in federal funding. We urge you to continue to educate yourself and to oppose Initiative 1515, titled Concerns Gender Segregated Facilities and Civil Liabilities. Thank you.
Well, it looks like that is all we have for this month's episode. We would like to thank Jessica Lynn and Kim Reid for being on the show today. As always, we would like to remind you that if you are depressed, suicidal, or just need to talk to someone, you can contact the Trans Lifeline.
These lines are primarily for transgender people experiencing a crisis. This includes people who may be struggling with their gender identity. While their goal is to prevent self-harm, they welcome the call of any transgender person in need. Trans Lifeline does their very best to connect them with services that can help them meet that need. If you are not sure whether you should call, then you should definitely call. Their hotline is staffed by experts on transgender experience, transgender people themselves. All are trans-identified and educated in the range of difficulties transgender people experience, and are ready to take your call. Don't give up. You're worth it. You bring a uniqueness to this world that no one else can ever duplicate.